Laurie-Anne Power is a criminal barrister, and she joins us now. Laurie-Anne, good evening.
Good evening, James.
Thank you for your time. I think what Britain did in the time of the Empire, and you know, some of the things we've done have been appalling. I don't really think we should get into the Crusades now, because I'll have a field day if we do. Yeah. It was an appalling part of our history. Other countries have things that they are ashamed of, or should be, as well. But what's going on at the moment seems to be wanting to try and change what this country is all about, isn't it?
Not at all, James. I mean, the pulling down of Edward Colston statute is not changing history. It is history. It's a matter of fact that has occurred in time as a consequence of numerous amounts of people, politicians, local level politicians, refusing to listen to peaceful protests, the last one going back to 2017, where the people of Bristol demanded, asked for, petitioned for, campaigned for the removal of someone who most people would consider to be a symbol of hate. Put it into context.
We talked about this before, Laurie-Anne. I agree with everything you're saying. I agree with it totally, but I want to try and move it on nationally to an argument that there are statues all over the country that have backgrounds that would not be acceptable in this day and age. And if there was a huge demonstration of people trying to pull down the statue of Churchill in Westminster, do you think that would be right?
I think that would, as obviously I have to say as a caveat, I'm a lawyer, and any act of damage on property is criminal damage, and so I don't encourage people to go out and commit acts of criminal damage. But I would completely understand why certain groups of what is now an integrated, diverse society, very different to the society that Churchill reigned over, would be offended by the valorization of a statue of a man who they perceived to be anti-Semitic, racist, homophobic, and all of the other forms of discrimination you can think of. I fully accept that Winston Churchill plays an important part and is an important part of British history. That goes without saying. The difference between, though, James, I mean, let's just look at it on an everyman level. The difference between someone like Churchill and Edward Colston is this. In school, most of us were taught about Churchill to a greater or lesser extent. Whether or not we was given a full history lesson of his personal values and his views and his, but we know about his contribution to, obviously, the Second World War and to Great Britain as we know it to be today. Edward Colston, being valorized in Bristol, having died 300 years ago, represented absolutely nothing other than death and hate. People in schools are not taught about that.
But they should be.
I was taught about it.
Well, you may have been, and you're very lucky. But at the black community in Bristol, and I speak to Bristol because I suspect Colston is the main feature of this headline, is that people aren't taught about what Colston did. When the statue is a standalone figure, statues are there to be admired, to be revered, valorized. And
they could be hated. They could have put a plaque on and said what he did, and then it could have become a figure of hate. He could have been humiliated for the rest.
It was too late by then. Well, the damage is already done because the campaign set up in 2017 addressed all of these different options. But we're in the middle of a protest where the central issue is race hate in this country. Governments have refused to listen to people when they come to them in peace and say, I, as a descendant of the slaves who Edward Colston oversaw, this city built at their hands and by their blood, I have to walk past this statue every day, and that is a symbol of this city, and he oversees this city, but he has caused more harm than good. He should have been confined to a museum a long time ago, to the history books, and in the history lessons, let the schools Take the children to the museums.
Yep.
Let the
I couldn't agree
statues
more.
be in there, and let them look at that as part of the curriculum of the true history of our country.
Well, what you're saying is, if you can't get a democratic vote, get a mob together and just do it yourself.
No,
break the law.
I'm not saying that. That's an ignorant view. What I'm saying is that we know over time, when governments don't listen to the people will force them to listen. The people have, for many, many years, said, the society we live in now is a completely different society to the one these people reigned over hundreds of years.
Well, then you should be able to
ago.
democratically get it removed, shouldn't you?
Well, we haven't been able to. We've been trying for years, and no one has listened. And so the young people, these weren't old people, these weren't people of the older generation, these are the new generation who are saying, you know what? My parents may have lived under the shadow of a race hate, of a statue of race hate. I'm not going to do it, and my children surely aren't going to do it. And so
why weren't the local... Sorry, Laurie-Anne, why weren't the local politicians... And we spoke to the former mayor of Bristol on this programme the other night, who's very apologetic and said he should have. The current mayor of Bristol said... Well, basically what he said was he was a bit too scared to take it down because he thought it might cause an enormous backlash.
Well, that's what you're in politics for. You're in politics because you are there to listen to the voice of the people, backlash or not.
Yeah, but the voice of the people didn't say vote. They didn't vote to get rid of it. They should have. But isn't it an embarrassment on Bristol that they didn't? So it should be there as a symbol of their own embarrassment that they won't get rid of it. The shame of them.
Well, hold on a minute. Sometimes common sense has to prevail. But no one can genuinely say that Bristol is a worse place because the statue of a man who caused years and years and hundreds of thousands of deaths and misery has been removed.
But so did Queen Victoria as well. I mean, you know, they all benefited from slavery. I know that's all he did, but...
Yeah, well, the whole world at a certain time was like that, and we've moved on and we've changed. Yeah. But just to try and widen this, I know you come from Bristol. You practice in Bristol, do you, Laurie-Anne?
Yeah, well, no, I'm from East London.
Oh, okay.
No,
all right.
I'm from East London, but I do work. I spend a lot of time in Bristol, working in Bristol, and it offends me. Can I just tell you, out in Bristol, in one of the just near the court actually, there is a marketplace, and I love Bristol. It's a beautiful city with a fantastic, diverse range of people, and one of the best universities. And you know, this is what the result of education is doing to our governments now. You've got to listen to the young people.
Did they commit a criminal offence, though, when they did that?
Well, they committed criminal damage, didn't they? But I mean, who's
so you said you wouldn't condone breaking the law, but then you do. But you do condone breaking.
Well, no, I understand why people feel the need to.
And you support it, though, don't you? You support
I didn't say I supported it.
No, but do you support it or not?
Well, I support the removal of the statue. I don't support people
But you don't support... You don't support the way it was done, do you?
Absolutely. No.
Well, no, you said they didn't get a democratic vote, so you do support the way they did it.
No, you can't twist my words, I'm afraid. If you listen to me carefully and listen to me what I'm saying is that the preferred choice would have been for local government or the mayor to listen to what people were saying and remove the statue. In fact, it didn't take somebody to tell you that it was offensive.
But hang on. Just let's clear one point up, Laurie-Anne, if I can. Does that mean that if something that a number of us don't like and democratically we can't get changed, then it's okay to take to the streets and get it removed?
It's not okay, but it will happen, and it will continue to happen.
But there may be, and this is a bad example because I think everybody, if they learnt the history of this man, would agree.
Yeah.
But what worries me is how people are going to feel. Well, there's something I don't like. I mean, this whole banning of Gone with the Wind. I mean, that surely is a step too far.
Well, I think we need to measure, because at the moment people are reacting. It's kind of like you shoot from the hip, and you're kind of reacting in what is at the moment an extremely emotive and quite volatile situation. And so while I say I completely understand why people pulled Colston down, and I agree with its removal, I don't necessarily think that every single thing that has ever caused offence on television, for example, should be removed. But what is important is that context is placed upon these things. Education is the key. you know. And
yeah,
so
I totally.
But
that's gone. That's disappeared from education. They could have said before this was a slave owner.
Wait. Listen. Let's move on from this, Ash. We spent 2 nights discussing it. It's happened. It'll be taken out of the dock. It'll be put in the museum.
Well, I agree. It should have been taken away.
Which is, okay. Well, people didn't want it to happen, and they couldn't get it happened. Also, presumably, his name is going to be taken off every building in Bristol as well. Half of Bristol seems to bear his name.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, and it's a slightly provocative question. Supposing people demonstrate and say they want the statue of Nelson Mandela removed because of what he did in his early life.
Mm-hmm. Well,
how would you feel about that?
I'd say good luck with that. And anyone who you are appealing to should listen to your arguments if they offend you, and if there's a sentiment of feeling where what Nelson Mandela stood for goes against the grain of our society today, then people should listen to that. But that's not going to happen because he didn't, and they don't.
Good. Well, there are a section of society, black and white, who don't really listen to some things most of the time, as you'll be aware.
Of course, yeah.
And this is what worries me, because I thought, and I've been sitting in a studio somewhere and doing this since I was 21 years old.
Yeah.
And the debate changes and has changed, and you know, I remember the first time I actually invited a member of the National Front on the programme because I wanted to show them for what they were.
Yeah.
And how that was received, and how the bosses said, "You'll never do that again. You can't ever do that again." But then this just festers. Yeah. And it you know, misguided and I hate to be so patronising, but fairly stupid people begin to sort of say, "Oh, I'm not being spoken to like. I'm not going to have that." And that's what worries me greatly, because I think we've moved on a lot from then. Look, nothing is perfect. But we were getting on. It's terrible to say this, but listen, I don't see my mates, whatever colour skin they have, just they're my mates. I don't really notice that, and so do a lot of other people who live now in this multiracial society. This country's always been multiracial.
Yeah. Well, the thing, I mean, the point is this, I think, and you make a good point, because I feel the same way. I have, you know, like you, I grew up in East London. So, I mean, in the 70s, my first experience of racism was living next door to the most prolific National Front family that, you know, that was known to the police. And every time my parents, who were West Indian immigrants, called the police said that's their right, that they have a right to hold those views. And that was a way of life for us then. I mean, I'm glad to say by the time we left the tower block, we were all very good friends. And that's the beauty of you know, evolving and actually getting to know people. But the young people now are not willing, I don't think, to allow the past to impact their future.
But they're also not, listen, they're also, but listen, I'm severely dyslexic. It's not a problem now, but it always was. I went to a really rough school. I don't have any qualifications. I learnt everything as I went on. I learned how to project my personality and myself and everything else. And a lot of people now don't want to do that. I mean, how did you get out from where you were brought up now to become a barrister? You did it.
Well, I did. You know, I had a tough job. I had an amazingly supportive family, but I don't normally tell my personal story, but I think it's important sometimes to share your journey. I went to a very, very difficult school in East London. It bordered Leytonstone and Forest Gate. And had I gone to school now, I would have been in a pupil referral unit, and the rest would have been history. But I worked my way through. I left school. I had a daughter more or less immediately upon leaving school, and worked 4 jobs while doing my law degree, and then went into the bar, and it was a whole other journey from there on in. And
I'm laughing because I was a dad at 17, and the reason I got that council flat is by that time I had 2 children.
You trumped me by a year. But the journey is important, because I tell people who now sometimes lose their way is that, you know, your background isn't an excuse. You can still make it through, and you can make it out. But what you need to have, and what young people need to have in the form of communities and mentoring and investment from the government is they need to have some structure and some investment in them. And I think as long as they've got the ambition and the drive, they can do it. But I appreciate that not everyone is as lucky as I am. And so, I just hope that lessons learned from these protests worldwide, but in particularly in our country, in London. I'm a Londoner born and bred, and very proud to be. I just hope that more good comes of it than harm, and I'm hopeful that it will, because I think we have movement and we have some real positive change.
Do you know, this is the best conversation I've had for ages.